Hi, I'm Misty, this is Misty Steps, and I have a problem. I think about Bloodborne too much. But that's not the only video game that I think about, especially when it comes to tabletop RPGs, and D&D in particular. While I have definitely stolen concepts and ideas from Bloodborne, which, don't worry, we'll get there, it's by far not the only video game that I have ever stolen ideas from. And I'm certainly not the only person to do that either. People steal things from videos all the time, whether it's a cool boss or a legendary weapon. Want the Moonlight Greatsword out of Dark Souls? Do it. One of my DMs took it and gave it to our party, as well as the Sword of Night and Flame from Elden Ring. But I think what I find myself actually stealing from video games for my RPGs in tabletop world isn't so much the visuals of a boss, although I have used that, and I've certainly used legendary weapons as well. What I often seem to steal are actually the mechanics baked in, or even the vague concepts or themes of a video game that I will try and impart into my games. Less tangible items, yes, but equally important, I think, and something that I don't see a lot of people talking about. So let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Misty, this is Misty Steps. Grab a snack, grab a drink, get comfy, and let's get into it. I did start this video with Bloodborne, so let's go ahead and talk Bloodborne and get it out of the way, and I can talk about other games then, I swear. But one of the things that I really like in Bloodborne is the insight mechanic in this game. As you progress in the game, as you defeat more bosses, as you see more and more strange things, you get more insight. And that insight allows you to see things for what they truly are. And it's so interesting because things have always been this strange eldritch horror, cosmic horror entities looming over the city of Yharnam. They're there the entire time in the game, but you don't see them until you have enough insight. You're simply oblivious to them existing there. And as a girly who loves horror, this is a mechanic that I love and am absolutely stealing. But I'm not going to utilize it as a mechanic itself. I don't want another thing for my players to track. I don't want to have to track something. But I love the idea that in a D&D game, for example, my players finally defeat what they think is a big boss, what feels like the end of an arc. And as they step out back into the city that they swore to protect, that they've come back victorious to, they notice something off with the statues. Did those statues always have 4 hands? Were the statues always crying? And are the tear stains new because they look constantly damp despite being stone? I love that. I love the idea that this is going to propel the players into realizing more things, and that this insight that they have from beating the boss and from seeing these horrors that the boss did will lead them down the path to an additional boss or to something greater than what they just fought. Again, if you're one of those people that like just having everything in one city, or at least a majority of things in just one smaller area, this is a fantastic way to add more intrigue and interest after your characters think that they've already been through the city. Something else that I really love is in Dark Souls. And this whole trilogy kind of touches on it, but Dark Souls 3 really shows it the best. You're told to light the fire, you want to get to the end of the game, you want to fight the Lord of Cinder, and you want to light the bonfire to reset the cycle. But as you go through the story, and as you talk to NPCs and you gather this information in bits and pieces that are broken along the way, you start questioning if that's actually the correct option. Is the correct option to continue to light the bonfire? Or should you just snuff it out and destroy this world so that this loop, this cycle, finally breaks? I won't go into all of the Dark Souls lore. Frankly, I know Bloodborne and Elden Ring lore way better than I do Dark Souls. There are other videos for that. Go watch a Vadi video on that if you're interested. But I think that the concept of that inner choice, that conflict that a character could have, is so interesting to explore. Especially even in a player. Is it right to defend the queen? I mean, that's what you were hired to do as a paladin, right? As this mercenary group, or this group of heroes, you were hired to protect the queen and to keep the city from going to war. But as you dig deeper and you find more information, is that actually the right move to make? Again, I love having these philosophical, deep inner thought questions that add conflict without a rolling initiative. It's going to cause conversation between players and characters as to what is the right thing to do? What is the correct next step? Is it to continue our mission that we're getting paid for and reap our rewards and get out of Dodge? Or do we incite a war knowing that innocents will die, but it will at least stop this horridness that's happening behind the scenes? It adds another layer of depth aside from save the castle, save the princess, get the reward. Having these deeper, grittier topics is a great way to add darkness and that grimdark fantasy that everyone seems to love without having to add in a wound system or be super grimdark on status effects and combat. It doesn't have to be combat focused for it to be a dark situation. And you know, if we're talking about FromSoft, I also got to talk about Elden Ring. It was my first FromSoft game after all. One of the things that I really enjoyed about Elden Ring is actually hunting for the lore. I loved reading the different information on the different armor sets and the different items that we found, and piecing together that lore about Marika and Radagon and all of that. And frankly, it's a lot. Again, go watch a body video. I will not get into it. But the idea of players finding objects and those objects having information that further develops the setting is really cool. For example, in my London campaign, one of our characters broke into the Queen's advisor's office and stole some documents to try and get to the bottom of some mysteries that they were dealing with. I made these documents, but I did add a lot of extra fluff to them. I also actually made a cipher and actually had them solve at least a little bit of the cipher before I gave them the unciphered version. I'm insane. It's fine. That's not the point of this. Don't be me. But by giving them those documents with all of that extra fluff, it's rewarding them before they even realize that it's a reward. Because I could simply give them so you find a document and it says that actually this character has been dead the whole time. And actually the person that you think is Bernadette is actually Bernadette's sister pretending to be Bernadette, and she committed identity theft. And yet, that's a wild reveal, don't get me wrong. But it's so much more satisfying for the players to be reading that aloud and to see it say, on December 22nd, 1886, Bernadette Verney was killed by blah, blah, blah. And to have that read aloud, to have all of the players hear that, to then decide what they're going to do with that information and how they're going to broach the subject as their characters to Bernadette now that they know that information, is so much fun to watch. And it causes, again, that really intense tension. And I think that tension is paid off best in these situations because it forces the characters to resolve it themselves. So if, again, the character who broke in, if Adina wants to square up against Bernadette, she can. That's a decision that she can make, and she can resolve that tension in that way. Or maybe she tricks Bernadette in order to get information, or she leaves a note for Bernadette to find out that she knows that way. There's so many different options here. It could have been blackmail, it could have been camaraderie. And I think that brings some very exciting drama to the table without, again, dealing with combat. I didn't have to write any stat blocks, and frankly, aside from high stakes combat, which I do love and I do really strive to have high stakes combat, this is another way to raise the stakes without needing to challenge rate or to go through the monster manual. I just had to write up some documents. And frankly, I had Bernadette write up her document, and I just tweaked it and added it as needed based on what I have as the DM. That way, nothing that didn't need to be shared was in there, but I have Bernadette's backstory. I know what happened to her. I just need to fluff it out a little bit and give it to my players. And if my players are clever and read through that whole document, and maybe they find a couple of extra little nuggets of info, maybe, just maybe, they'll get rewarded in the future by knowing something ahead of time. Okay, I promise that was the last FromSoft one. I'm done talking about FromSoft for a little bit. I'm sorry. I could talk about them for a long time, but we'll wrap up that part. Spyro the Dragon is also one of my favorite games. Again, I have a tattoo of Spyro as well. And it doesn't have to be Spyro, but that is the one that I think of just because of the amount of nostalgia I have for Spyro. But I think the collectathons can be really fun. Now, I don't know that I would suggest this for a full campaign, but if you just want a high stakes, fun type of one-shot, a little chaos one-shot, I ran a one-shot where the Fey King, Zampike, who has been there the whole time, if you know, you know, have a little bit of a collectathon to see who could collect the most of these diamonds. And I had them kind of float in the air. I described it like the gems in Spyro or like the items in Crash Bandicoot, where they just kind of magically hover because they can. And the story started, this one shot started with, through a series of unfortunate rolls, your party is now stuck in the hands of the Fairy King. You have to beat his Riddles 3, his games, his challenge in order to gain your freedom. So they had to run around and collect these, and it was really fun to do the collectathon and figure out, you know, well, some of them are up on these weird puzzles. How do you get that? Some of them are locked behind NPC quests. How do you do that fetch quest? Those collectathons, those challenges could be really fun for characters. And even outside of a game changer type of situation, that collectathon could still be useful for me to use. So again, just thinking aloud, in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, I'm running that campaign right now, and it would be very easy for me to make that a task that the hag would give the players in exchange for information, or have them collect all of the magic green-winged butterflies in the swamp and bring them to Bavlorna. That would be an easy task for them to do in exchange, instead of one of the chores that are written in the book. It's not something that adds a ton of tension to the table like the others have, but it is something I think that can add a little bit of fun and whimsy, and something that I think can help break up the tension if you feel like things have maybe gotten a smidge too heavy. There's also the opportunity to reward with these as well. You know, if someone gets 5 tokens in a day, maybe you reward them somehow with that, with an inspiration for the next time, or you know, if they get X amount, maybe they get a free reroll at any time. Something like that would be fun. The last thing I want to go over is from the video game Okami, which is, again, one of my favorite video games. I know a lot of video games do this, but Okami is one of the games that I think of the fastest when I think of iconic NPCs. All of the NPCs in Okami are very, very caricatured, they're very memorable, and they progress with you throughout the whole game. You meet Camille and her sister in Kamiki Village, and Camille doesn't believe in the gods, and as you gain powers, they're on a pilgrimage as well for their own reasons, and as you run into them throughout these different places and you get your additional powers, you can use those powers to make her realize that maybe the gods do exist and gain that praise from her. Susano is a character who starts as a coward, and by helping him through that, he becomes more and more brave and more willing to help you as the game goes on. Wakka starts as an enemy and evolves into so much more than just an enemy, and you realize that the secrets that he's holding are secrets for good reason. Even Isun, your little companion who kind of speaks for you and narrates the game, grows with you. And I love that the NPCs have growth just as much as the players, because they're not stagnant either. The player characters are absolutely going to grow. They're going from level 1 to 10 in an average campaign, or somewhere in there, 3 through 8. And aside from that growth, they're going through these huge events, these big fights, and learning more about themselves, as well as learning about the world around them, and that's impacting how they react. And likewise, that should be impacting the characters as well. And it does impact the characters in Okami, and I think that that's so important. They're not flat. They're not characters that never changed. It's not the Skyrim guard who, no matter what you do, is going to say the same line about taking an arrow to the knee. The characters that you meet are going to grow and develop along the way based on what happens. If you're running an Eldritch Horror game and an Eldritch Horror attacks the town, they're gonna act shaken. They're going to be scared. If the heroes save them, they're going to trust in that hero more. But if one of the heroes doesn't show up again or gets hurt, that's going to impact how they feel as well. Or if they think that a rumor is sent flying about one of the heroes actually being related to the bad guy, are they going to still trust that hero? This was a really long-winded video that it basically boils down to making your backgrounds as vibrant as your player characters. I think FromSoft does this pretty well. Okami does a phenomenal job at it. I know that there are other video games that do this as well, but these were the ones that came to mind and the ones that are nearest and dearest to my heart personally, so I wanted to talk about those clearly for those reasons. But I think the end goal here is that you can absolutely learn from these situations. You can learn from these video games. You can learn from how a video game handles these situations. If you like how Dragon Age handled Cullen, utilize that. If you like how, if you were big mad about the plot twist in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, don't do that. I have opinions. If you have opinions, please put them in the comments below. But keep your characters as dynamic as your players' characters. And feel free to steal things from video games and media that aren't just cool weapons or cool boss designs. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz, comment. I do respond to all comments, or at least I do my best to, and I will see you next time.